Hey, welcome to You Won't Hate It, where we look at life through the lens of pastors at the length of a cigar.
Yeah.
Well enunciated.
I'm Josh.
Yeah.
I am Ryan.
I am Joe.
And that was heavily enunciated because that was our first take. He just wanted to make sure he got it.
That's right.
Nail it.
So I think this is important to clarify every once in a while. The intro is we are looking at life through the lens of a pastor at the length of a cigar.
You mean the thing you just said?
What I'm saying, it's worth,
Okay.
Because pretty often, I would actually venture to say every episode, I get a comment from somebody. Why are you talking about that? That's like outside of your lane or your purview.
Yeah.
And then we get a comment that's like, I can't believe you guys call yourselves Christians and smoke cigars.
And they go, how long? How long is this episode?
Often they get, that's not long enough. That's what I get most of the time.
Yeah.
I could have listened to that for 4 more hours.
Yeah.
That's what I usually get.
And I go, it's the length of a cigar.
Nailed it.
Good cigar.
But the problem is that I don't think people listen to that first part. We are looking at life through the lens of a pastor. So life is all things. Because sometimes I'll get the you guys are talking about politics, like stay in your lane type thing. And I don't understand because I'm like, that's
part of life.
That's part of life. So it is in the
I
lane
will
of
say,
this podcast.
when we're picking stories, we are picking things that come back to where is our sweet spot, which is the Bible.
We try to, for
yeah,
sure.
like that is, we're realizing, we're looking at life, but there are things that we're saying, we get it. Like this is, our strength, it's going to, and it's actually our worldview. And so when we're looking at things, we are thinking through, how does this apply biblically or as a Christian or as a pastor? So in some sense, but we can talk about anything. We could talk about movies, politics, but we do tend to pull in things that make sense to our worldview where we actually have some experience.
Well, it's life that has some bearing on religiosity.
Because that's what
That's some bearing. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
There are some things that we goof off about and we laugh about, but I mean, that is part of life and we enjoy ourselves. And if you don't like it, please leave a comment telling us how stupid we are. Because there's
Well, I don't think they need to be encouraged to do that.
nothing. Actually, they do.
Plenty.
We don't get enough. There's nothing more entertaining to me than.
being told you're dumb. Mostly, that's actually that they have not been that nice. They've been much meaner than that. But you know what? Keeps things interesting. Keeps things fascinating. By the way, since we're on this topic, do mean comments on social media, whether on your personal feed or on this podcast, do they hurt your feelings? Do you always respond? Should you respond? Just a quick little, since we're just doing this, by the way, like and subscribe and leave mean comments to this and share this with a friend. Does that bother you? Like, I don't think I hear that enough. Like, I don't hear a lot of people, they joke about the mean comments, like podcasts, radio shows, all that stuff, but they never talk about, like, do you wrestle with responding? Does it hurt your feelings? Like, what's the line where you're like, all right, I actually need to say something?
this is good.
I think, what is that line? We actually do that. Oh, yeah, I got it.
I normally lock my chair and I didn't lock it. And I just
Oh,
Bye.
he's gone.
He's out of frame.
yeah, Josh, that's a good one. What do you?
Well, I haven't had much experience with mean comments. More comments that are just confused.
Yeah.
The only time I was really on social media was with my music stuff. So I'd play some covers, and then a lot of people would be like, what is happening? They'd be confused.
Why are they confused?
Why is this Korean guy sounding like this?
And
so it's not mean. It's
for people
more
who don't
just,
know, you have a very deep voice, and you'll play Johnny Cash, and and you're singing Johnny Cash.
Yeah, so it's...
Have you ever gotten mean comments? Or mean-spirited or sarcastic?
Maybe a couple.
But nothing do you remember?
Literally like 1 or 2 that were just like, yeah, nice try, bud, or something like that. I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
Nice try, but you have like an amazing voice.
It is funny.
That actually makes me feel better.
It makes me curious.
That makes me feel better. That when someone would be like, nice try to Josh, I'm like, oh, the standards are just ridiculously high.
Well, here's the problem. Those aren't standards.
It's trolling.
They're really not. Yeah, that's just trolling. And I think there's a small percentage of trolling, and most of the time you could actually weed through those and understand, like, oh, this is somebody just venting and for no reason, just trolling.
Especially when you go on there and have 1 follower, because you're like, it's a burner
stuff
account.
like that. And then you realize that sometimes you get one, you're like, okay, like that seems like it's worth
Give me one. You have a large following on YouTube, and I know you.
So personally, you're talking about personally?
Either one, like church, personally, like where you're like.
So the church
crossing
ones,
a line.
So here's the difference, and this is what might seem odd to people, but I feel like I have kind of a compartmentalized life. So like my business stuff is pretty outside my church stuff because I really don't intermingle those at all.
Like morally, like the business is completely immoral.
Exactly. Well, that's what I run as a nonprofit. I run the church as a for-profit.
That's
so
smart.
It's very different.
That keeps the IRS off your back.
Exactly. I think I've mentioned twice something about like church or God on my woodworking and blacksmithing stuff, just because it's not like. It's just, I don't find, if there's a natural mix, I'll do it with no problem. I'm not embarrassed.
Oh, well, I feel like there is a natural mix and you're avoiding it. Jesus was a carpenter. I feel
what's
like.
funny is the 2 times I think that was my joke, and I was like, I happen to be a pastor.
That's right.
But those comments are way different to me because I find them comical, and I will often respond sarcastically and funny because to me,
If you respond.
if I respond at all, because there's
Because you have millions of views on certain things. Like to follow every comment.
Yeah.
Even like when I comment or say something like encouraging to Russell Brand when he's talking about his faith growing, I'm like, he's never seeing this.
No.
Probably not.
Because it's like 9,000
Probably not.
comments.
He may, and that's the thing is sometimes
He may need mental health counseling then. If he's like, I'm going to read all 9,000 comments.
Well, what's funny is a lot of times, like you'll have it's not a publicist, but a manager who will kind of feed you stuff or say like, here's
Anything you
some.
think is neat.
Yeah. However, those are the ones. Well, I will if I respond at all. It's usually very sarcastic and almost like I'm trying to be funny, and it's funny for me to rile you up because my thought is, you just got like clearly riled up. You went to 9 or 10 from a video where I'm making a shelf.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you've got to calm down and you've got to seek some help. And so I will usually snap back with something stupid because the one I get more often than not, because some of my videos are like DIY type stuff. And so I'll put, DIY, whatever. And they'll say, well, I could do that too if I had $50,000 worth of tools, and my canned response is $50,000. There's more than $250,000 worth of tools here. Who are you getting at $50,000? You couldn't get this.
Way more help than
you could do it
realize.
$50,000.
That's what I always say. I was like,
Show me.
You're also forgetting the 9 other carpenters I have here behind the scenes who are actually building this.
So it's always some, which then I'm like, and a lot of them, which is funny, come back with like oh, that was pretty good. Like touche type thing. Like they enjoy it.
Yes.
Every once in a while they lose their minds more because they're just like, I can't believe you would have that much. And I'm like, first of all, why are you saying you can't believe I've spent that much on tools? I'm a professional carpenter. Like this is literally my job.
Right.
What do you, that's my business. So
this is comment season right now. It began because of the Trump trial and it's Pride Month. And then Juneteenth. So this is going to be post and comment season, and that's all flooding the news right now. So this is really appropriate to talk about it because if you post something, so we're looking at it from the angle of you post something, someone comments, what do you say? Do you respond to all of them? Do you respond to some of them? And then, and part 2 is, what do you comment on? I've probably written and erased more responses than I've written comments or posts, and I post a lot. I've probably written and erased more responses to comments than I have anything else.
Dude,
because
you're
I'm just
so
like,
right.
What are the comments regarding?
they're usually not thoughtful, and they're just usually mean-spirited, or they don't understand, or they're just baiting you into to respond at all.
You mean wait, no. What are the comments he's writing or the comments he's responding?
He's responding
the
to.
ones responding to. Like, so on just certain posts, people say stuff, and I'm just like, and I literally have to think through who's this good for? I'm thinking through if I don't say
most of
this,
the time it's just me being vindictive in
that's
some way.
right. So,
so you're like, there's no
So
point.
I'm like, I only respond where I'm going, this is actually going to be helpful for this person, or it's going to be helpful for the people who are going to see these comments. That's it. That's the line I draw. I'm like, if I can't find out how it's good for the person who's even being mean or good for those people who are going to read it, then I don't respond.
Yeah, what's funny is even the good for those people, I pause a lot also.
Yeah.
There's this weird, this is so good. No, I wanted to keep that. I looked over because I was like, is that, that's funny. Sometimes I'm like, even though I think this would be good if other people came back and read it, I'm like, it just sometimes doesn't feel worth it. Like a lot of the comments, so every episode we get not every, but most every episode we get a comment about, I can't believe you call yourself Christians because you're smoking cigars.
Amen.
And I'm like, first of all, go back and watch, what is it? The first 3 episodes are talking about it. So I encourage you to go back and watch those. And sometimes it's like, what's the response in an actual short response that you could give somebody? Like, hey, it's not wrong. It's like me telling somebody, I can't believe,
Especially they could Google it.
I can't believe as a Christian you would buy that bag of chips. That's what it feels like to me, because I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to that. Those don't correlate to me.
Right.
Buying a bag of chips and being a Christian are mutually exclusive things. They have nothing. Smoking a cigar and being a Christian literally have nothing to do with each other.
We'd have to craft a standard reply to can Christians smoke cigars, whether it's a video or something. And I had one when I worked at First Baptist because it was on Fox.
But it was just 2 letters, and that's what was bad. I didn't think it was right.
It was an entire email, not just, and it was an explanation of tattoos in the Bible. Can Christians have tattoos? With 2 video links of conservative pastors talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, so I was just like, so not even like I'm just saying it, but it took some work to craft that. So anytime somebody reached out, they just sent them that standard reply. You'd have to be doing that all the time, every single time someone makes that comment. When the reality is, you can just Google, is it morally wrong to smoke cigars?
Right.
But
biblically wrong.
Well, the problem with the Google, the Google,
I like that.
On the interwebs.
the problem with the Google is that, like, it'll give you that, yes, it is immoral, and yes, it's moral. It'll give you both. That's what's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you need, with certain things like this that I think are genuinely like, it's so simple, but you do need the right response. And I don't know.
I won't write a response if I can't end with, this sounds funny, I hope this helps. Because that's how I know I'm in the right spirit. When I'm done answering, I'm always like, I hope this helps, because I'm just looking to try and clarify.
See, well,
even if they won't receive it.
Everything I say, I hope it helps too. It's what it's helping with.
You hope it's received.
Yeah.
I hope it helps you throw yourself off a cliff.
It's usually like, I hope this helps you laugh a little bit.
Yes.
Like, I hope this helps you loosen up a little bit.
Sure.
That's kind of the main, because honestly, most of it I just think is, I think I mean, I preached this, and I hope I did a good enough job, but this weekend was very much like everybody needs to relax. Like, we're way too tense about way too much stuff. Like, this is, and I'm not saying we're not talking about eternity and some deep, big things, but I do think you're talking about your opinion most of the time. And you've stood so strong on your opinion, and you have become, it's like fascism, for crying out loud, half the time. I'm like, you are so aggressive with this idea that you have, that you probably heard from somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
That probably doesn't have backing or grounding.
Right.
I mean, that's the Goodwill Hunting. He's like, are you quoting that from page 136? Do you have any ideas of your own?
Yeah.
Which is what happens is, I had someone, and this is just real. This just happened at church the other day, and it's over something that's nothing, but it's interesting. So Caleb Williams had a rough day. He's the quarterback for the Bears, #1 draft pick.
He did not have a neat day.
He didn't have a neat day.
Yeah.
He had a little bit of a rough day, but nothing horrible.
Just at camp?
Just at OTAs, like his second practice ever.
Yeah.
Not great, no interceptions or anything like that, but just didn't play great. Yeah. And people were talking about it. And so, anyways, a troll account that I follow, because it's funny, he's like, Caleb Williams has 7 interceptions and is going to be benched and all these huge things. Caleb Williams does 3 crying, laughing faces underneath it. He knows it too. So I had somebody come to me at church like, oh man, I'm a Bears fan too. I'm like, oh cool. They're like, yeah, it was rough. He had 7 interceptions the other day. I'm like,
for real?
Yeah. So I was like, so people don't know the difference between troll accounts and real accounts. I'm like, so just quoting that as fact, that's the issue. Like, even then, they're like, you would openly share that in public, something that you're like, oh, you just saw it, read it, and believed it. That is the hardest part about all of this.
So what should we? So I have a thing that I'm trying to move to that helps with all of this.
Becoming a hermit. Like,
it's just leaving.
Becoming a recluse.
Jumping off the planet.
Nevada.
Tell me what you guys think about this, because and I want to ask if you guys have something like this. And I don't do it all the time because I usually forget, because it's pretty new for me, because I'm realizing I will listen, I listen to everything. I listen to all the crazy conspiracy theories because I find them entertaining. Yeah. And sometimes it does get jumbled up. So I've moved from making statements to asking about everything, like, hey, did you hear if Caleb Williams made 7 interceptions, like I thought I read it, but I didn't know if that was like a real. Did he really have 7 interceptions?
Well, that's a helpful.
So like with all the different things, and I mean with everything, like hey, have you ever read
Jesus
this?
rose from the dead?
What?
Like,
What's weird though, but it is like, hey,
That was a troll account.
It does bring people into the conversation.
because
It does.
and it's more of that doing that with everything. Like, hey, does this verse say? I read this verse. Does it say this? I couldn't tell. Instead of just telling people, and honestly, it's not. I think it's a good technique for a lot of things, but it's primarily
it comes
meant.
back to the heart of the way you think, which
And
is
it's primarily
good
meant
for
to
us.
like, and it sounds weird, but like to, no, I don't want to say protect me, but to be like, yeah, I don't, because if I make a statement like, oh, this says this, especially when I keep finding these different things, like an interpretation on a scripture that I've always thought this way. Great example is the one that the camel through the eye of the needle, and how it's like, I've heard for years, because I grew up in the church, for years I heard that, well, Jesus probably was making an analogy
to a gate called the eye of the needle.
To a gate called the eye of the needle. Right. Always heard that. I've accepted that forever. I've probably said it in half a dozen sermons. Then I find out recently from a YouTube channel where the dude did an insane amount of research and he's quoting all this stuff, where he's like, no, that term eye of the needle for that gate that Jesus would have been referring to wasn't called the eye of the needle in any recorded literature until like 300 years later. And I went, oh God, so I've been making a mistake. And maybe he's wrong too. So it's kind of like the way I even would present that in a sermon now isn't,
I don't know.
this is what Jesus meant. Here's 5 different things that Jesus could have meant by this. All of them speak to really tough for a rich guy to get the, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
So approaching things like that, do you guys have something like that? Do you think like that at all, or do you just not care?
Since we became friends and you are big on asking questions, I think that keeps the conversation going. I tend to ask people, I've asked a lot, I'm like, hey, are you more of a statement maker or a question asker? Because I think there's a lot to be learned from asking more questions than making more statements. And again, not even out of protection, just out of wisdom. You know what I mean? Like there's just some, and out of actually growth. If you make statements are like, I have to challenge you.
You're right.
After you make a statement. If I'm going to respond, I'm coming up against your statement. As opposed to if you ask a question, I'm now part of the conversation. So there's just some good wisdom in that.
Yeah. I'm such a fan of the real Socratic method. Like when I was young, I remember learning about it and just thinking it just means asking questions. And then as I really studied Socrates, I realized like, wait a minute, that Socratic method isn't just asking questions. It's a strategy of prying into something that you don't know. Because the problem I've seen with a lot of people is they'll ask a question that they want that certain answer for, or they're leading.
They're leading questions. That's not the same thing.
Yeah, and the real Socratic method is genuinely, I don't know either. Let's go on this journey together. And
or
I'm
even like you have a thought about it.
Sure. Oh,
But you're open to being wrong. You're like, hey, I've studied this intensely, but still, I'm like, what do you think about this?
It'd be rare to not have an opinion at all on something.
Right.
That'd be really odd.
It's in the previous episodes we've talked about like steel manning the arguments is the best way to progress a debate or discussion.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that, even though it's making a statement in a sense of like, hey, this is what I'm getting. Can you tell me if I'm correct or if I'm wrong? And this is what I think your side is saying and the point you're making. Even though it's a statement form, it's like for the purpose of being curious,
right?
And getting understanding their side. So I think the hard part about just making statements constantly from a place of, well, this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is what I know. It does. It doesn't offer conversation.
Yeah.
It's more like, well, I think when you look at Jesus and the way he approached everyone, he was always asking why.
Yeah.
Why do you ask me this? Why do you say this?
Who do you say
why
I
did you
am?
come to Who do you say I am? It's always
who loves more, the one who's been given. You're right.
Right. And it wasn't always a leading question. It was very genuinely curious. Like, why do you say this to me now?
Yeah. Well, why don't you feed them?
Do you have something? How do you address that in preaching? Because preaching is predominantly a statement-making venue. Like a form of.
You're proclaiming, and you're trying to move people to do something.
So do you have? We do Q&A, which I think helps a ton.
Yeah, it helps a lot.
So we have that interaction. Is there a way that you, if you're not if you don't have one or conscious of it, it wouldn't make one up. But like, do you have something where you're conscious when you do it? Okay, make one up. Make up.
Yeah, no, I think because I think the dynamic is getting people even the idea of beseeching someone to do something right. You're preaching, you're asking, you're like moving them to an action. I think that the action you're moving them towards isn't so definitively laid out that it leaves room for curiosity. I think it's, as opposed to being super narrow, it's wide enough for an array of like, and even like just I was working on my sermon for Sunday, like I even wrote in there, I'm like, I'm not sure about this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it felt like a 50-50, you know what I mean? And I even said, I kind of think it's this. So even in the preaching where I'm leaving this, where there's space to be left, I leave space. You know what I mean? So it's almost like this idea of, we can talk about it because I'm openly saying, like, I kind of think it's like this, but there's kind of 3 different views here. I kind of would lean here, but, you know, it could go different ways. So I think as opposed to us actually asking questions, I think leaving the space where there should be space helps.
Yeah, it's leading someone in those areas where it's not definitive and it's not, because there are a lot, you know, if we're talking about salvation, it's pretty definitive. I'm not giving you different ways to get saved. There's thinking one way to get saved. He is the way, the truth, and the life, period.
Yeah.
But when there's a bunch of the other stuff.
Well, and it's good to invite people into them landing on what is a sin or a victory that they're going through, as opposed to me telling them, right? Where you're like going like into preaching, you're like, hey, getting them to think about, wait, what's that thing that you need to work on this week? Where that isn't a conversation starter, where it's going to be individual for all of them, as opposed to everybody's this, everybody work on this.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, well, that's
and
probably
I like being conscious of those things while you're preparing that sermon, like while you're writing that sermon, because that is sometimes I haven't lately because we haven't been preaching as often, but if I'm preaching every single week or twice or 3 times a week, sometimes that won't be conscious to me while I'm writing, because I just need to get the information out so I get it out. So sometimes it's nice to have the little breaks where you go, I can actually really craft this, really work through it, massage it, make it like.
I've had to tell myself not to write this next week's sermon for all last week. Yeah. Because I just want to get into it, but it's so gets monotonous if you're looking at something.
Yeah, if you do it for 4 weeks in advance, it's brutal. Yeah. I've had friends who prepare like series out in advance, and I'm like,
it's so boring.
It's not my thing, and like because it'll change throughout. So I'm like, I just can't.
It's the same thing with like worship. Like we've talked about it, you know. Different leaders in the team are like, well, why don't you just send it out, you know, a month in advance? And I go, well, I don't get the sermons in advance.
Exactly.
Even though we might be in a series, I can't predict perfectly everything. No. And even still, it's like in the past probably 3 weeks, there's been a change, like audible every Sunday morning. And it could be something small, but it just works. You know?
In terms of sermons and series, no idiot would ever pick the 4 verses I picked in Philippians to preach on. Most people would have picked the juicy, amazing stuff after this.
Well, and the same thing.
Smart
and you picked the section. Yeah, my section this week.
His was just the closing.
Was hilarious.
It was a farewell.
I could have blown past the first 4 verses and been like, you know what? I hit the jackpot this next section, but I'm like, I can't get past these 4 verses.
I almost jumped in. That's funny. I almost jumped into chapter 3 because I was like, there's some good stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, but I bet you and honestly, it felt like a little bit of a fun challenge because I was praying and like, is every word in the Bible, I've done this pretty often, but because it says all scripture is God breathed and worth something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, even the one where he's like, hey, I hope Timothy goes to see you.
Yeah.
What? Like, what is
him
there?
Like, hope you accept him.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
But then as I got through it, I was like, dude, I have 4 hours of material for this. I had to hone that down. It took me so long because I'm like, I think I made 3 points, and each point could have been its own sermon. And I'm like, from a nothing scripture. So I'm like, it really is all God breathed. Like, it's amazing.
We get this horrible, like, not that interesting dynamic with Timothy and Epaphroditus, and then in the next verse, which again, there's no grammar there. It's all one thing in the original language.
Yeah.
And like, furthermore, I say rejoice. I'm like, well, I can't just ignore that.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Basically, what the humility of Christ and the, you know, you're in bondage and chains. I'm like, and then I didn't realize that in 3 would be a pinnacle, and it is, because he's all of a sudden resetting the deck and saying rejoice, and I'm like, well, I'm a doofus if I just blow past that information. Like, at least have to deal with it a little.
It's fun, right? Like,
it's a blast.
This is entertaining.
These first 4 verses are, I would say, innocuous, except for the fact
Yeah.
that they're just kind of fun and they tap on a couple of
I do think
different thoughts.
it's funny in most. It's like, reading through Romans and through Acts and all of them, Galatians, everything. He's like, all right, I'm heading out, or it's like, I wrote this to you, and whoever comes next after me, except that, by the way, and he'll make another point.
He always has.
It's,
yeah.
it's constant.
It's a true letter.
Yeah.
It's a true epistle.
like always
He's
a
writing to
PS.
someone.
Yeah,
he just had a thought. You know what I mean? He's
It's
like,
a little rambly. All of his stuff. All scholars believe he's like Paul was the king of run-on sentences.
Well,
he
oh
just.
my God.
But then
He's brutal.
And I like that there was specifically saying like, hey, this is in my voice. This is what I'm writing, versus what Tertius, whatever his scribe that helped him write. I believe it was Romans.
remember his name, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
It's
interesting
funny if
because
his name is Tertius because at tertiary would be like
Oh yeah,
it's
it's
hilarious.
tertiary. Yeah.
it's interesting
Tertius
to
or
me
Tertius?
because you. I think it's just pronunciation. I think it's.
I think it's spelled Tertius.
Yeah.
Tertius.
It's Tertius is how it's spelled.
Yeah. But Tertius is like.
Yeah.
Silent Tortuga. I got it. Go ahead.
Tortuga.
Turtle.
But it's so interesting to me because even in the ones where he explicitly says like, I wrote this guy did it. There are still so many scholars that are like, well, no, he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like somebody else
might
wrote that
dictate it.
in, and you're just like,
But
I'm exhausted by
but
that.
look at the way it's written. It has so much of his his fire and his spunk and
I
attitude.
can't. After studying the canonization of Scripture and the authenticity of the epistles and the New Testament, you study it so much that now when there's like, but what about, I'm like, I don't even have an argument anymore because I'm
Right.
so convinced of this, and I still listen, and
Yeah.
I will still, but I'm like, it's just too overwhelmingly like clear.
But that'll happen on like Fireside Theology. That's what I really enjoyed, and actually that was new and healthy for me. Having that space, just seeing it, and people going,
Yeah.
well, what about like the Gnostic Gospels?
Yeah.
Like why don't you guys like? And then you go, well, why is that a point of tension for you? And like,
What about the Gnostics that you like, or what
Right.
about that passage?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to reset us to the top only because I do think it's important because everything you're talking about here is really kind of hitting on this idea of, again, Pride Month, Juneteenth. You're looking at Trump's been convicted. What is something worth commenting on? So we get back to, because we were talking about comments on this podcast. Is there anything that you're looking
okay.
at on, like when you go through the news feed and you see something? Is there any? I mean, I know this group. I mean, we're not the big. But I'm like, but then why not? Is
Let's do
there
this.
anything worth commenting on, and why wouldn't you?
When was the last time you left a comment? Think about it. I don't care if it was about food that you ate. What was the last review, comment, Yelp?
Anniversaries,
anything?
birthdays. I do anniversaries and birthdays all the time.
Okay,
Congratulations.
okay.
it was
on
literally
anniversaries,
just saying like, hey, this guy looks like this other actor. That was the only time.
Whoa, what
yeah.
was it? I gotta know now.
Well, there's a channel I've watched called Athlean X. It's like a PT and like workout.
Do you regret that I asked?
birthdays. No, it's fine. It's actually,
No.
I'm actually
Anyway,
okay.
the guy he's been working with for years is like he started out
Okay,
really
now I get
skinny,
it.
and now he's bulking
Oh,
up
yeah?
and getting really
Nice.
fit and making a lot of progress. And I just realized he looked like Rhett from Rhett and Link. So
Oh,
I'm
how
like,
funny.
he looks like a brunette version of Rhett.
Yeah, yeah.
And like it's uncanny. So
Okay.
no one liked the comment. It's not like no one's gonna respond to it. No one cares. I just thought.
Do you feel a little bit like a little jaded and a little slighted when you're like, I left this awesome comment, nobody likes
Wait,
it?
do you
and you're
ever
like,
go back to your notifications?
I'll
and
go
look
back
to
and-
see if anybody like. I'll be like, anybody? Nope, still nobody.
I'll go
liked
back
it.
and like it.
last comment you left like that it wasn't
Okay,
a,
it wasn't. They're usually
yeah.
usually stuff
happy
like
birthday, happy anniversary, awesome.
like
Those are
I remember one specifically.
Yeah.
Floyd was getting a tattoo, right?
He said therapy. He said
He said something like that, and so my comment was the way his arm is on there, it's missing, and I just go, "Where's the rest of your arm?" Because if you look at this picture, he's got his arm open like this, and then from the elbow down, you can't see it, and I
Okay.
don't know where it is.
Let's do this. I'm trying to think of when was the last comment that you left
substance.
that wasn't a friend, and if it was a friend,
Okay, this
it was
is
a
good.
little bit like it was contrary. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's not it could be a friend.
So it was opinionated.
It could be a friend, but it's kind of like a, hey man, I think you're out of line for that post or something to that effect.
I shared this on a sermon because I commented on somebody was saying there's no way the Bears. This is the extent of my intensity.
Yeah.
There's no way that there's no way the Jaguars have 2 games in London or don't have 2 games. And I was just like, oh, I just read an article and I posted it saying, well, maybe they do. And he came at me, and then a bunch of other people came at me. that was it. Like, even in sports that I adore and I follow, like, I don't like commenting because people are coming at me for something as simple and innocent as, like, oh, not even me. Here's the link of the expert writers from Jacksonville who are saying this. And I'm like, and I'm an idiot. Gifs how stupid I am. And I'm just like, it feels like the most worthless.
Gifs are the best.
Worthless
They're
accent.
so
I mean,
good.
like, I'm the stupidest person on the planet. I'm like, again. And for me, I don't come across mean. And it's hard because I'm like, oh, I could just destroy you. But I'm just like, why? So that being said, like, that's the last one. I'm like, I would never venture a comment of anything of weight.
Yeah.
Because the people on the other side, not the one posting, but they're not reasonable.
It's the picture's worth 1,000 words, man, because a GIF is really, it can really cut you to the core.
Oh, yeah. No,
It's
they're
better than like,
bad.
you're an idiot. A good GIF makes you go like, oh, God, that one got me.
I almost showed
So
it.
good.
I was going to show the GIF on at church online because some people see, because it's like somebody like, use your brain, think GIFs on. There's like one person, their brain's being eaten. They're just like, I'm stupid. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
One time someone commented it was the Toy Story when they take the dinosaur. He's like, I don't want to use my head, and they're opening the vent. So someone like, and then the conversation ended after
So
that.
what's yours? Mine was. I've only ventured out in sports and gotten so much flack from sports. I haven't gone anything deeper than that.
I, like you, have erased
1,000.
more comments than I could probably count.
Can you remember anything that you wanted to comment on? You didn't?
So I can remember the last time I commented on something was a woodworking video where I was like, hey, man, this was a great job. Like, I really appreciated. It was everything from the project he did, the story he told, the cinematography. It was super impressive. He had a tiny, tiny channel. And I really thought, I just want to encourage him, like, dude, if you keep doing this, your channel will blow up. It will take years, but like, you've got that thing, you know, that kind of special thing. Cause he was bucking against, so currently the system to get big is to do these very snappy cuts and have it be like quick paste, and it's you like snip in like funny videos. ADD. Dude, it's shocking what even the big like prime channels will do, and I don't like it, and that's just personal.
Well, because you actually want to learn. Yours, what I liked about yours, the DIY, is like someone could actually watch this video and actually do it.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of these, they're like, here's how you do it. I'm like, I felt like you skipped 9 steps.
Exactly.
Where's the material?
Yeah.
Where's it all
And
at?
I love what's funny is I want mine to be like hilarious and fun and crazy, but I genuinely want you by the end of this video to feel like you can go out in a shop and do this. Like, that's my goal.
Yeah.
And I love when guys will stick to that kind of, and here's the deal. If that's not your goal, I don't care. Have a ball. Be stupid. Don't explain stuff. There's a couple channels that I love that have zero desire to do that, and I love their channels.
Yeah.
I could just tell this guy. So I encouraged him in that. Most of the ones are people will say something on like a Ben Shapiro or a Jordan Peterson video that I'm like, I can't believe you would say, like, you clearly didn't watch the video.
Yeah.
And I can't, the amount of times where I've gone like, but he said literally the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And I want to timestamp it and just be like, he clearly refuted what you just said he said. And then I go, what's the point?
Yeah.
What am I going to, because then I'm going to get in a match with some stranger. It's pointless. And I erase it.
Only time I've ever felt like I want to comment is that I'll see something, it'll elicit a response of some kind in me.
Yeah.
I go on and I look for the comment I want to make. See if somebody already has it.
Right.
And then I'm like, once it's there, I'm like, oh, I literally go, oh, okay, someone said it. But then if it's not, I'm like, oh no.
I've commented.
Oh no, I'm in a spot.
I've commented a few times on Reddit, I realized, but they were all usually just funny, where I was like trying to be funny, because I'm like, if Reddit is they're the wittiest people in the world. I can't figure out how they're all not comedians. I can't get over how funny people are. They're shockingly
Some things
good.
are just so. I mean, I show Lisa comments more than I show her videos.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this comment is so funny.
Trevor and I will send each other comments constantly. Be like,
Comments are
forget about the
amazing.
video. Look at it. It's like, it's amazing.
I've got a couple. I'll tell you when we're not recording, because some are just like, this is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, you can't.
They're just, but I will say, what ends up happening is like, I've been so burned by like, that guy threw a football nice. I'm like, wow, that was a great throw. 9 comments under there. Yeah, because no one's there. Maybe blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They're going to suck. And I'm like, Oh my gosh. I literally just want to say,
Yeah, what's the point?
And on the lowest level of importance, like something like sports fandom,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine when I go on, I see stuff online, and then I'm also shocked by someone will post something nice, and then people come after them where I'm like, I want to say
Yeah.
something about this because this, but then literally I'm in some sort of keyboard war with somebody in a basement who doesn't have a job, who literally has their only hope is that someone will respond to them. I'm like, I empathize with you. I'm just not that guy.
Or even is like, say they're a super successful person, like, what are we doing? We don't know each other. Like, there's zero benefit to this. We're not helping each other. It is a form of entertainment, and I actually think it's a very degrading form of entertainment. Like, this isn't positive, because it is. If you think about it, sometimes it's kind of fun to be like, oh, we go back and forth, but it devolves so quickly, and it usually starts in such a devolved place that it doesn't even devolve. That what's the benefit?
I remember taking, when I was in college, I took a communications class, and we did a whole section on mediated communication. That's what everything is now. And our teacher was, I remember him just really being like, hey, be careful with this. Like, and it was in 2011 through 2012. So it was around the time like Skype was big and other things. And he's like, just be careful. It can be so abused and dangerous because you're not face to face with people.
Yeah.
And he said it started with texting and emailing. You get that passive aggressive nature connotation. It gets totally misconstrued. And then you can get people going, oh, I'm safe behind my screen and my keyboard. And there's
especially now that it can be anonymous.
Right.
And
so
anonymous.
and he's like, I'm all about freedom of speech. I'm all about people saying their opinion, sharing what they think, what they believe, putting people down, standing up for others, whatever. But just know that be intentional with your words. And he was all about that.
Yeah, it's good.
So,
You know, when I was earlier on in ministry, if I were to receive a note as a pastor that was unsigned, I threw it away and didn't read it. Because I would always say, if you don't have the courage to sign it, I don't have the time to read it.
Yeah.
That's social media now.
Yeah.
If I go and you're on a burner account, if you don't have the courage to stand behind what you're saying, that's already half the comments. I'm like, I'm out.
Well, it's just really tough to take.
There was money in it.
Yeah.
It was an anonymous donation. They just want to be anonymous.
You want to see what I do?
Yeah,
Test.
they would have
coward.
They would have still been open.
I know this is a crass show, but their social commentary can be really great. South Park has a whole episode on trolls, and it was fantastic.
Really?
It was a whole thing, and it was just like, it was the same idea of like people just being like, getting home, I'm a doctor from every day, and all of a sudden get on the computer, I'm going to let out all the venom I've been holding back, you know what, I don't like this about you, I don't like, and it's like becomes this cathartic way to just crap all over people, and just because you're having a bad day, and so you just go and be mean.
It's pretty sad. I don't like it. So yeah, the comments, I do think there are clearly things worth commenting on. Let me ask this. This is good. So this weekend, I'm going to try and be slightly diplomatic when I present this. This weekend, the men's ministry at our church called Forge hosted a Texas Hold'em fundraiser tournament. We all played in it. It was a blast. You buy in with a donation.
Yeah.
And you do not win money. It's a donation that grows the men's ministry, and they use that to scholarship guys for different events.
Food and prizes.
There's food and prizes here and there.
It's mostly about getting your name on the belt.
The winner gets a ring and a belt that stays at the church.
It's literally just bragging rights.
Yeah,
You can trade out that game with any other game.
Yeah.
It's a donation, you play a game.
But it's a fundraiser. Somebody on Saturday, actually, it was the day, or Friday.
Yeah.
Friday, the day of the tournament. Was that Saturday or Friday? Friday.
It's Friday.
But point of the story that matters is what day it was on.
I get it, though.
So on Friday morning, somebody took to our social media pages, multiple, and was like, this is the worst thing you can do.
And part of it was because the video
100%.
I used was a clip from Rounders, and it said no limit, which to me, I'm not a big gambler, so I didn't. It was the no limit that really, just for clarification, that's what set them off.
And they had every right to do it. I actually think from their standpoint, they didn't know what was going on, so they saw it and they went, oh my gosh, the church is promoting gambling. So in their minds, which I totally agree with, they're like, that's terrible. You should not, as a church, be promoting something that has harmed so many lives and can hurt. I get that. But she went crazy in the comments, and it was actually pretty harsh.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I'm like, I don't think she was wrong. I'm wondering about the way she went about it. Was there a better way to do it? And this is helpful for all of us because there are things that you may see. She said one thing in one of the comments that changed my mind. Because when I first started, I was like, this is mean. She's not doing this right. And then she said something, and it said, I just think that when we see something wrong, especially in the church, we as Christians have to stand up against it. And I went, yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. I think that as a Christian, when it comes to your church especially, you have not only every right to, but you have a responsibility to stand against those things. And I don't think commenting is the worst thing you can do. That's why I appreciated when you commented back and said, oh, I'm so sorry, let me clarify. The video was probably stupid. That was my fault. You owned that. You said, but here's what it is. And honestly, she wrote right back and went, thank you so much. Like, I was worried. That was helpful. And I'm like, first of all, that was the best interaction I'd seen on social media in my life. Right. She owned it. You owned it. You both apologized. Came back together. It was great.
She won the tournament.
She ended up winning the tournament.
She was not in the tournament.
It was a men's tournament.
She dominated.
Just kidding.
Oddly. But what my question is, was her commenting correct? Is that what you should do? It worked out great. So if you're watching, which I doubt she is. She eventually reached out to some
of the women's ministry to get clarification.
Yeah, she did great.
I personally would have done it differently. Not that they even saying like, I would have messaged the church. But here's the thing.
How does she message? And I'm honestly curious.
On Facebook. If you're on Facebook, you just send a message to the church.
So a private message you're talking about.
Yeah, just DM it.
Okay.
But the thing is, and in fairness to her, though, I put it out publicly. So, so in fairness to her,
you're right.
It wasn't a private issue.
Yeah.
I put out a public video, and so she publicly responded. And so, in one sense, she's right. In the other sense, I said I think I would have won one, but again, not wrong what she did because I put a public video out there.
It's a different way to
yeah. And at this point, don't have that strong of a relationship with her, so she might have thought like, I'm just going to respond there, and it had emotion and she felt and strongly about it, and who knows what her experiences with stuff like that. So she was concerned about people, and so it's kind of this. It's not wrong. I'd have done it a little differently, but not wrong.
There's a natural checks and balances with that publicity when you're commenting something, because if it gains traction, ends up on people's feeds, someone who disagrees maybe, but they're reading it and they go, okay, hold on, that was a little harsh. Or they go, hey, you know what? I agree with you. We should probably, hey, First Street, you should check this out. Like, look at this. So I think it was, I agree with that relationship portion that there was a sense of safety and security and boldness.
Yeah.
So
and if we had all had a friendship and that happened, I'd have been more like, hey, you could have just messaged me, but we don't. So she's kind of like, you put a public video out, I'm responding to a public video. I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it. It's that same kind of what we started talking about in the first place, that I'm thinking if that were me in her shoes and it was something enough to get me to comment, I think that next step is, and this is what's difficult on social media, because I saw this a long time ago on Facebook. I don't know if it still happens, but people would be like, hey, I honestly am trying to start a conversation, not a fight. And they would, and then it would always devolve. But I'm like, I like that, like, hey, I don't know how you do it on social media. And this is why I keep stumbling, because I'm like, what I'd love to see is her be like, hey, I'm really unsure about this.
Right.
Is this the right thing? Are you guys holding a gambling event? Like, because that seems contrary to, And it's tough because it's like that how I'm going to read that is probably negative. Whereas the way I said it, it would have been the way I typed it. But the way that you read it, because of the way that we have our natural filters, there's no emotion in there. So you're like, oh, are you guys thinking you're going to do that? Like, that's how I'm going to. And so it's almost impossible to do online without.
Even if you do ask a question, instead of a statement saying, I disagree with this. Bad. If you genuinely ask, I'm genuinely curious, do you guys think this is okay?
And it's so funny because
it'll be like, oh, that's sarcastic.
Yeah. Right.
Do
you guys really think this is appropriate? You're like, oh, I can't win. Like, I really, So you're right.
I think it's interesting. Lisa is a commenter and a poster of things that could be taken one way or the other. And because she just thinks it's so important for this stuff to be out there or to be corrected if it's said wrong. And I'm always like, I don't know who you are, man.
I love people like that.
She is 100%, and it's nice, but I'm like, oh, I don't care how nice it is.
I just think it's so funny because you're like, that thought of like, I have to get this out there. And there's nothing against Lisa. I think Lisa's amazing. And her posts are probably great. but it's that like
That's not what your comments say.
exactly.
It's defensive for people. That's where the
Yes.
it's literally like somebody's being hurt, and Lisa's like, nope.
Standing
I
up for
just
others.
love it,
Yeah.
which it's like that is the reason to post it something, in my opinion.
Right.
That is the reason. I always, for me, and this is the Gen X in me, where I'm just like, oh yeah, 97 other people have posted that already.
Yeah.
I don't need to say
I
anything.
think bystander effect was created for the Gen X.
100%.
I think we created it.
Sit back and watch the world burn. Like that's what we
my
got.
first response is, has somebody comment? Okay, there's my comment. I'm good.
Exactly.
There it is. I'm fine. I'm always like,
My favorite ones are like you'll notice kind of like trends with certain comments that just become like the host of the next Country Waffles is found, or they found the next host of the Country Waffles, or one.
happening?
It's just
Host of the Country Waffles.
I don't know. It's like
are you
I guess
talking
because a lot of or whatever IHOP or something, like a lot of fights happen. It's like, oh, they found the next host for the next IHOP or something. It's just a trend of comments.
I've never heard
Like
of
there's
this.
never heard
like
this
one that's
phrasing.
happening. One that's I found is let me pet that dog, and it's like DAWG. So it'd be like a video of like a terrifying giant alligator,
Oh, okay.
and someone's like, let me pet that dog.
I
You
always
know,
thought I-
and so just
the one-
random trends of
yeah.
of
The one I
things.
like now is if only there were a channel that had only ... and the thing that's
Yeah,
on
I
there.
just started seeing those recently.
Those-
I think
or
that's
just-
super fun.
and
Bruh.
and when people have a confusing age,
Yeah.
like I just saw one, they're like, this guy's 5012. Because I can't tell how old somebody
Right.
is. I've seen a lot of those.
That's
Like,
totally funny.
'cause there was a basketball video, and the video's like, this guy's 12 years old. He's 6'10. He's dominating. And he goes, he's 12 years past his divorce date.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Do you want to get to a story or a
Yeah.
question?
It's a question. The stories
Sure.
were placeholders.
This is a simple question that I've been wondering about. So, comedians will almost always tell a story that is either completely false or exaggerated like mad for their bit.
Sounds like the basis of comedy. Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So like you will often hear them say, "Oh my gosh." So Thursday night, I went to the thing.
Is your comment? Are they lying?
No, I'm saying
Okay.
like in a bit they'll do
Yeah,
that.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And chances
They're
are
setting it up.
Thursday night they were sitting in their apartment writing this
Oh,
bit.
Can I guess
Like-
what your question is? If you don't ask your question, I want to guess what it is when you're done.
Oh,
Set
well,
it up and
I'm
I'll ask my question.
Okay. So in your eyes, is it wrong in the slightest bit for a comedian to do that? Which, by the way, technically is lying, correct? And maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, that's your question.
Exaggerating or
Because I think I know where you're going. That's
totally,
why-
100%. Yeah.
I thought is your question isn't lying in the second part you're going to do.
Yeah. Is there anything in you that's like, oh, that's wrong, or
Josh, go ahead, go first. What do you
No.
got?
I don't believe that's bearing false witness. You paid money or you clicked into the video to be entertained by a comedian.
okay?
It's literally no different than writing a script. It's the same idea. You're
Telling a
literally-
story.
This is literally based in fiction. You know what I mean? Like, so if you think people are going there to get some sort of informative truth, as opposed to I'm going to tell you anything to make you laugh, and so the story is just better told from
But
first person.
But you're putting then the onus on the audience to know.
You're coming to a comedy show. I hope you would know that.
Oh, there's a lot of
Yeah,
people
think-
in this world
Yeah.
that are very interesting.
I don't think it's lying in one bit. Again,
Yeah.
because it is entertainment.
Exactly.
And the format of comedy is first person.
Right.
If it was preaching, it'd be different.
So
That's where he's going.
so obviously this is where I'm going.
yeah.
I figured.
So now what? Is it wrong?
Yes.
Is it
yes.
is to use a sermon to say a sermon illustration with a false or exaggerated story. So let's do this. This weekend I talked about a time I went to Vernal Falls, almost fell off the waterfall. That is a 100% true story.
Now, if I tell it,
My wife is there watching it.
I tell it though. No, next week.
Or if it didn't happen and I thought this is going to be a great sermon illustration.
Or how much can you exaggerate it?
That's the next step. Where is the because I am the king of exaggeration. I love exaggeration.
Me too.
Because it makes the story more fun.
Oh, yeah.
But at its heart,
The
it's
fish don't
still
become 50 from one fish, but it becomes embellished
exactly.
for sure.
So and I do, and this stems from a lot of the Jordan Peterson just don't lie. Like I've actually been. Well, for a while now, I'm like, you know what? I like that. There's no reason to lie.
Not lying.
We've found some places where it is, like if you're saving
Surprise
somebody's
party?
life. Surprise
party. Come on.
Sure.
Because there's got to be intent mixed into with that.
Sure.
It has to be intent.
But for the most part, I actually think, and I think in what he's saying is correct. He uses the example if your spouse
99.9%.
if your spouse asks you, "Do I look fat in this?" How do I look good in this?
You tell her she looks fat before she asks.
Exactly.
That's,
That's why I'm just constantly running around. You don't look good. You don't look good.
You just get ahead of it.
It works out way better. So as a preacher,
yes, you're
as a worship leader, you're going to tell a story before one of the songs.
Oh, okay.
Where is that line?
Isn't the intent of coming to church that you are believing in spirit and truth?
Yeah.
Isn't the word truth 100% associated with preaching? And if you're going to, you're going to comedy to laugh.
Okay.
You're going to preaching for truth. And if you're going to blur that line, at minimum, you're causing mass confusion.
So I know dozens of preachers who tell sermon illustrations as their own.
Because they think it's better
that
told
are not
as
their
first
own.
person.
Instead of saying, "I heard this story," they say, "I was at the grocery store on Thursday night," and they were not. And that's not, and they literally, it's a written sermon illustration that they took, made it their own.
I don't know, a bunch of those guys actually don't write their own sermons either. So for them,
100%.
that's where they're blurring. They're like, well, I didn't write any of this.
So you're saying, let's say they did write their sermon.
Yeah.
They looked up, oh man, I need a sermon illustration for service.
I looked at I actually am using 2 sermon illustrations this Sunday.
You're such a liar.
Yeah.
You're starting this off by lying.
Both would never believe it was me, so it's real easy. One guy working at a feed store.
And you're not saying them as your own.
No way.
Right.
Not in a million years.
Because you think it would be wrong too.
I think the intent of it, 1 is 2, you come to church for truth. So at minimum, you're confusing people. At 2, my intent is to sway you in a motivational speech and sermon. I'm beseeching you to do something. I'm using a false story to get you to do something. And so I think that's where the line is. Whereas he's just trying to make you laugh. I'm trying to get you to do something, and basing it in truth, saying here what is true.
But is it wrong to tell a parable?
What Jesus never said he was the guy.
No. But you can still tell a fake story then.
Well, yeah,
You can make up
a story.
Right.
It's just a story.
You can make up a story that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, because it's just a story.
Because at that point you're saying it's like a man who, and then you tell the story of the man for that illustration.
That's the purpose of the format of a parable.
Yeah, even though it never happened.
Yeah, you're just telling a story. In fact, I don't even know if these stories are real that I'm reading. They're fun.
Are you using any parables?
I'm not.
Oh.
But so the idea of that is, I think it'd be different if Jesus was he's like, I once was a rich young man. And I was like, okay.
Okay, so there is I'm just intrigued because that all seems pretty cut and dry. It is a little blurry though. What about exaggeration?
We
are guilty of exaggerating.
I'm trying to think of a line where before I became a Christian, the line.
Oh, before I got saved, I was.
Yeah.
I mean,
I straight up lied.
I was like, if my listening audience was not enthralled, I made it bigger.
Agreed.
And all of a sudden, it just grew by reading the room. Though this is not landing, so let's make this bigger.
Yeah.
I don't think I've gone, and even the longer I've been a pastor, I think I've less exaggerated. Not that I haven't exaggerated. I probably told the story with more dramatic pauses, and probably did that and emphasized it. But I don't think I've changed the story on some crazy level where I'd feel bad about it.
I forget because I
also because my wife is there, and if I did, she would say something.
I know.
She'd be like, "That's not how that story went."
enjoy the embellishing part of things. I actually think it's fun. I think they add to the entertainment value. But in sermons, I'm scared to now.
Yeah.
It scares me because of the experiences I've had with other preachers. And it freaks me out because I'm afraid. I'm afraid something. I don't know. Somebody's gonna call me out. So I'm like, what?
Your wife fact checked you on a story which by the way
was so funny.
Which showed that your story was less embellished. Because her statement was a greater embellishment of the intensity of the story, which was a fun way to be fact checked.
Totally, yeah.
She's like, it's actually worse than he did.
Exactly. Yeah. I just think that is there a line with embellishment that you're like, that's not okay?
I think we need an example. I'm trying to think. I was trying to think of one of when I've ever embellished a story.
The surfing story. The story of you when you learned to surf.
It's funny. I was going to share a little bit of this Sunday.
Oh.
That's true story to a T.
Yeah.
about literally how I learned how to body surf.
And I remember-
you jump and I
Okay,
jump.
so what if? Okay, this is good. We'll try and use this example. We'll chase it down a little bit.
It's hilarious. I'm literally telling a little bit of this because it's the perfect
So
example
it's
from there.
well, it's not that funny. Every time you preach, you tell the same story. So it's not like he was just playing the odds
He's
game.
truthful, though.
Yeah, no, we believe it now. It's the same every single week, dude. It's the
Slow down, pot.
Yeah.
Don't beat up the kettle too much.
100%. So you're learning to surf. The guy says, "Jump when I jump," like into the wave. So that's all true.
Yeah.
That's all true.
100%.
You continue that story by saying like, and then that very first time, because I was taking his example, I did a little bit better, and then I followed his example again, and I kept getting better and better until I became an amazing. And you're adding that. None of that's true. Like,
What's not true?
well, let's say that like, so you use that story to make a different point than you usually make. And the point is, because I followed him, I got better and better because I was following him.
Yeah.
That's not really the point of that story.
Right.
It's that you were following his example. He's more of the example, right?
Right. Okay, so you're saying.
And so let's say
the point
you-
is I become a proficient body surfer by following his example. And the funny is I usually use that story as more of an illustration of his life to me.
Exactly. So that's the point
really
of that story.
more
Right.
the illustration.
You now take the story because you like it,
Yeah.
and you're like, you know what, it could, because it really could be, if we're honest, it could be a cool example
how to do everything.
of I became a really good body surfer. Body surfing or
Yeah, it's body surfing,
bodyboarding?
yeah.
It was
It's
body
body surfing,
surfing. I became really good at body surfing by watching him, and then I eclipsed him. I don't know. I'm trying to make it to where it's like,
Like, oh, to exaggerate it.
yeah, so you're
Well,
exaggerating.
Then eventually I was body surfing with dolphins, right? I got to the point where I
Sure.
could keep up with the dolphins, or right, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I think.
I'm trying to like go into
I
like,
don't know.
or
It's like Tarzan, but in the water. You
Or-
were raised by dolphins. There's something great.
how about this? How about this? I got this. I became the best body surfer on the beach.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. If there's no way to qualify that
Yeah,
right,
concept. Do you know what I mean? But I start saying
Something
that
like that.
like people would notice me.
Yeah,
Like
and-
my body surfing is like people are like there's the
So
best
now
body
you're taking
surfer.
a true story,
Right.
And and so other people then started asking me
man.
for lessons on body
Yes.
surfing, and it's all because I watched this guy.
Right.
So the story's true.
And let's go
but you've
let's go
embellished.
the middle where I
Okay.
noticed people saw how much I body surf. So it's not something you can
so
prove.
good.
I can't prove it
yeah.
one way or the
good.
other.
And you're
but people
not
be like,
lying.
oh my god.
You're not lying that people asked you when they didn't.
Yeah. they
You're just
saw
like,
me.
I know because people always watch
They
me.
just see
Like,
me.
yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So
Yeah. I'm gonna start doing
did we
this.
go too
This
far?
is Sunday. This is happening
No,
Sunday.
this is the right thing, but this is the line where it's
Yeah.
like you can't
Right.
prove it one way or the other. It's all in my own mind,
Mm-hmm.
like they did. Like I took that one all the way to the sand, and everybody was staring.
So is
at
that
me.
wrong?
Yes.
It is. That's my problem. Is I was like,
totally wrong.
immediately, yeah.
It's
I don't
wrong.
even know why I'm asking.
It's
Yeah.
wrong. It's totally wrong.
Yeah.
Shoot.
Even if you think they're looking at you, you probably should not say that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a spot.
I went
where,
from this really growing moment to this super prideful jerk.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what
pure
it's at.
arrogance.
Now I'm just super
I'm trying
arrogant.
to find a
with
spot.
with no real validation in my
Right.
arrogance.
Right.
I'm trying to find a spot where embellishment isn't wrong. Like, and I'm trying to find it. I don't know why. I think
I
it's
think
just
it depends on your
it's
your
interesting.
usage of embellishment. So as an example, like
I mean,
when I
like
was
the,
talking,
like the dictionary usage.
yeah, sure.
How about that?
So like the idea of so when we like the song First Street when I talked with the team and I'll say that Matt helped me write it. It was a small portion, but he really did help in the direction of the rest of the song.
Yeah.
So I always like giving credit where credit's due, but I do also say like
But his part's bad. Is that what you're saying?
there were portions where it's like I literally sat there and I prayed through it and I there were words that were just kind of given to me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to embellish that more if that isn't embellishment itself, saying that like, hey, it was in the Holy Spirit and with the people around me.
Okay, I
and
like
my
this.
my experiences and skills and practicing.
Maybe,
Okay,
I think
okay, so-
embellishment would be if you said I had no help and it was
Or-
just all me.
Okay.
No, because that would be a lie. Because it's more of the, let's say you prayed about it, you felt like the Lord led you to some lyrics, right?
Yep.
The embellishment would be like, I sat down and like I knew God was God was going to write this song.
Is
so
it weird?
Okay.
Is it weird to have people in mind who talk like this?
No,
So go
we
ahead.
all know that's kind of where I'm leading. It's like
Yeah.
and I prayed and I did everything shy of fasting because I sought the Lord's face and said, God, I need your words. And like spoken with the Holy Spirit, like I had the words, the lyrics to the song.
Isn't the intent behind that so people will believe you're more spiritual or the song?
So we're back to
Right.
intent.
It goes back to
It really is
doing
back to
that.
intent.
You're doing that so people are like, oh my gosh, I can't
Yeah.
question these lyrics.
Right.
I can't question your heart.
Or I'm trying to get you to see how spiritual I am.
Yeah.
I want you to think
Spiritual
I'm
song is,
amazing.
I'm amazing.
Yeah.
The song's amazing.
As opposed to just saying like, yeah, actually, it was kind of crazy. I actually prayed that God gave me some words, and He gave me some words.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the intent's a big part of it.
Yeah, it is. Because if it is
Yeah.
because if you're just like, it's the only way I write songs. I literally don't. I don't feel. I don't feel like I'm thinking about it. I feel like God's just giving it to me. Like
Right.
it's a little bit more like that's just the format. I
Yeah.
don't know what to tell you other than like somebody's like, you're such a great writer. I'm like, to be honest with you, like I just feel like the Lord gives me these like gives me the words in
Yeah.
the moment I need them.
Right.
So, and by the way, if you like that song, that's His credit. And if you don't like it, then blame Him.
Sure.
So you know, I'm out either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a tough one. I don't know.
It's fun to pick at because
Well,
it
it
really
made me
is.
think because these are two forms of, I think I say it all the time, but Jerry Seinfeld's quote about like pastors and dictators and comedians all have that kind of narcissistic vibe in them. And I thought, yeah, there's something about the way a comedian speaks and people just sit and listen for half hour plus, sometimes
Yeah.
hour plus shows, and hour plus sermons. And like, a preacher, and so I see them as so analogous in so many ways.
Let me throw
And
one
I
more
heard
in
a
there.
comedian did a story where I immediately was like, no
Nope.
shit.
Yeah, there's
And
no
then
way.
it was so funny because after the story, he goes, okay, I got another story that didn't actually happen, but this one time, and I'm like, loved
right.
it that he owned it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I thought, if a pastor did that, I remember thinking like, I love that, but that one doesn't coalesce well. Like it doesn't.
Let me ask
I don't know.
this: is pausing and delivery manipulative? When Jesus told the parable, did He just tell it flatly? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there anything in
chance.
storytelling is manipulation in the way you tell the story?
100. It has to be. A soundtrack to a movie is 100% manipulation.
It's literally, are we manipulating people when we play
Right.
music, when we
Yeah.
give the gospel?
No one tells a story and tries not to have intonation in their voice. It just isn't, because
Oh my
you know
gosh.
full well.
That spoke to me.
Did it? Did
Yeah.
it get you? Right? There's no way. So every
It's part of human communication.
intonation, exactly. And the more you speak
It's not
publicly,
It's not like speak for joy. You shout for joy. There's intent. There's emotion behind it.
and the more you speak, my gosh, the better you get at that.
Yeah.
And you're literally trying to draw people in. I'm trying to keep their attention. It's fun for you and them. It's like,
Right.
it becomes entertainment in not the negative sense, but it
Yeah.
becomes like, I'm the most conservative preachers in the world. I'm like, I love when they get mad at people who entertain, because I'm like, well, that's what you're doing. You're yelling about this.
It's a
So
performance.
John MacArthur tells a funny story, and he's like, what? Why did he tell that? That wasn't out of the Bible, and he does. All of them do. Piper, all those guys. They tell stories.
Olstein, they start out with the
Or
joke and then
examples of like
Yeah.
a touching story or
My
something
gosh,
like that.
did you ever
Right.
hear John Piper? I can't remember where he was speaking because it wasn't at his church. It was at a conference or something. And he's speaking, and it's pretty funny. And people kind of start to giggle. And he continues, and then people bust up because he tells a joke. And then people are like laughing and he's talking, and he gets like a few minutes in, and he goes, "I don't know why everyone's laughing. I'm not joking." And everybody was like, "Oh God, what?" Because he was saying such outlandish, kind of goofy things.
Yeah.
And everyone thought he was joking around.
No, I haven't
he
seen that.
was dead serious, and
Amazing.
it becomes the most awkward. It's one of
That's
my favorite
interesting.
sermons I've ever
It
heard.
becomes awkward.
He was trying to make a point and be like sincere, and it came across as joking because it was kind of goofy. I'll find it for you later.
Yeah.
And because John Piper is one of the best speaker preachers, whether you agree with his theology or not.
Oh yeah,
that
don't
guy
forget that delivery's
is
great.
gifted as all get up.
Yeah.
But I've never seen it like like not land. It was just great. It was so good.
Well, and part of preaching, we talked about this earlier, is you are beseeching someone to do something.
Right.
So delivery is not religion. I'm telling you right now, you show up here, when we preach, we're going to be preaching to encourage you to do something. This isn't teaching.
Absolutely.
It's not just learn something. It's
Yes.
go out and be different.
Yeah.
And so there will be tone, whether you're like that hooper who's going to yell and preach, or
Yeah.
someone who's really serious, or someone who's going to shame you. Whatever it is, all those are techniques of saying, like, go be different.
Yeah, preaching I heard it summed up really well once. It was, what does the Bible say? What does the Bible mean? And now what are we going to do with it? Like that's literally everything. Here's what the Bible says. Here's what it actually means.
Yep.
And now there has to be application. Like we have to take this. Otherwise, we're just sitting around telling stories.
Right.
And even stories are like meant to do something, right? So I don't know. It made me think hearing this comedian, and I'm like, I don't know if there's room for that. I don't know. I think that's one of the spots that doesn't translate well into preaching. Is that I'm like, you can't make up something.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm fearful of embellishing too much if there's not truth in it. Like I'm okay if it's like that car was going, 80 miles an hour, and you're like, this thing felt like it was going 200 miles an hour. Like that's fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't have a problem with that. But it's when, the car was parked and you're like, this thing flew by me at 100 miles. And you're like, wait a minute, that's actually didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So
My cousin Jay has a great story of his buddy, because it was 55 on the highways in Chicago forever, in the freeways, and 55 is just annoying. And so a cop pulls him over. He's like, this cop pulled me over. I was doing 75. It's not like I was speeding. My cousin Jay goes, well, I'm no state trooper.
I
75 is speeding.
I quote Vince all the time with he was wearing that car like that.
yeah.
I use that all the time.
yeah.
You could tell he was
good.
wearing.
This guy was an animal.
Yeah.
He was wearing that car.
I think it's such a good line. It's such a visceral, like, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple stories here. Do we want to go with those? Do we want to go to a
Let's get
question? The Kravitz or the evangelists?
Let's do Lenny Kravitz, because that's to do with celibacy.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Lenny Kravitz is celibate for a decade. And he says it's a spiritual thing.
Wow.
That's his quote.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to see. I read into it.
Previously, he talked about, like, he tries to model his life after Christ. Otherwise, it's all BS.
Really?
Yeah,
Right.
that was a previous. So this article put together a different comment he made, because he's not saying why it's spiritual. So they
Right.
kind of backtracked a different interview where he
Okay.
says, I tried to model my life after
It's
Christ.
going to help me find the right person. This was on a CBS Sunday morning interview. So I'm not going to waver on that. The rocker said at that time, that's a promise I made to God 3 years ago.
Wow. I think Lenny Kravitz is one of the coolest humans in the world. He's so cool. Like when I think of cool, it's Lenny. Like
Lenny Kravitz, cool.
that's a different
It's kind
realm.
of funny because you nail it, because when he talks about, like, being in shape or being cool in this thing or fame, he's like, yeah, I don't care about any of that.
No. That's
what makes you really
he
cool, when he's just like,
exudes.
Yep.
He exudes confidence and
60,
skill
by the way.
and talent. He's 60.
yeah. And
No
doesn't care that it looks great.
Way.
He just says, my whole goal is mind, body, and soul. That's like I live my life thinking like that.
I can't. I didn't know I could like him more,
I
I
think-
just found out I really like
I think
him.
part of it is like the discipline portion. It's like, man, this guy's disciplined. He's not
Highly known for that.
He's not
Yeah.
boasting about it.
Yeah.
There's a humility about it, but he's still a confident guy. So it's it's
and
a good balance.
I don't see many people who I just immediately are like, oh, God, that dude's cool.
Right.
There's like the Brad Pitts who I'm like,
Keanu
Brad Pitt
Reeves.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, they're great. Keanu Reeves is like one of the coolest dudes ever. But Lenny Kravitz is genuinely, I don't know why he's on a different plane to me. I'm like,
Right.
that dude is so cool.
What struck me about that is that it is not a value I see in our culture, even the next generations.
Anywhere.
And the idea of even being celibate prior to marriage, people like, and I hear young Christians talk about, like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, they don't get the idea of waiting till marriage. They don't see it as a true biblical notion.
Right.
And so I'm always like,
That is something it's funny, we don't talk about that much in the church, but it's one of the, it's such an important value.
Yeah.
And especially in not just in Christendom, but like, it's so funny because now we have so much science to back it.
Yeah.
We have so much that's like, you're dividing yourself. We know that science, like, take God completely out of it, the way we've been designed.
I remember the last time I talked about it from a God perspective when talking to people about premarital sex. I'm like, Just take
The
that part out.
psychology behind it.
Yeah, just take
I know.
take about the idea of this kind of intimacy and
Yeah.
then ripping that apart
Yeah.
after you experience it. It's not good for you.
No,
It's really not.
so crazy.
The best way it was told to me pretty early on, like when I was in college, was it was like gluing two pieces of paper together and then separating them. And it's
Yeah.
like you can't do it.
Yeah. And obviously I wasn't raised in a Christian household, and I went through all that, becoming a Christian, and then still getting saved and still having premarital sex and seeing all the damage that did. Like, that is also just real. Anecdotally, I'm not like everybody was fine after that.
Right.
They weren't.
No.
Not everybody was fine.
No.
And it wasn't the same thing as just dating a girl and then all of a sudden breaking up. You go to that intimacy of that threshold of actually having sex, like that changes everything for everybody. And then to just be like, oh yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore. You're like, no, that really hurt a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen a lot of where like, oh, here's the healthy balance. I'm like, I think the idea of celibacy is that it still goes back to this idea of culture still doesn't understand true intimacy, and we've made it about sexuality.
Right.
We've made it about sexuality in so many of our elements. It's so much to the point where we identify that we've raised sexuality, not just how you identify, like the actual act of sex, as being like such a high
Right.
point of importance. And the truth is, when we look at people who are happy, that is not truth.
Right.
What's true about is actual emotional intimacy and connection and partnership and friendship. And then sexuality flows out of that when there's a safety of commitment. It's not that hard to figure this out.
Yeah.
People who we see are really happy, that's what they have. They have monogamous, committed relationships where they're already healthy, and then sex is a part of that.
Yeah.
It's not defined by that.
So it's funny because we are. I'm currently in my quiet times. I'm going through Proverbs again, and so I'll read like a chapter of Proverbs. And I don't know, a few chapters in, I thought, man, I just started. It's like as of like days ago. I am gonna write my boys my own proverbs to them. Like that's what Proverbs
cool.
is. Proverbs is
5 of them are about cleaning their room. I mean, that's the
30 of them to one of the two.
putting the lid down of the seat down.
But it's funny because I'm
Flush the
reading
toilet.
through it, and I'm
Cleanliness next to godliness.
They're not even clever. It's
No.
one is flush the toilet.
it's
Proverb
just,
1.
Just brush your teeth before bed, guys. Like that's it. There's no reasoning.
He's not going with the Bill Shakespeare.
No.
Let's get some really
Real simple.
let's get some prose in here. Nope.
But I was taken back because I journal every day with it too. And my journals, some of them, I'm like, dude, something happened to Solomon because this guy can't stop talking about that evil woman, what's he called, the strange woman.
Yep.
It comes up in every chapter for the first 9 chapters.
You have like 900 wives.
Well, it's super funny because I'm like, it's
Which
an
woman?
interesting life experience.
Yeah.
And then I go like, what's cool is I'm like, that is one of the things that I really am trying to instill in my boys while they're young is like, hey, do not open the door of love before it so desires. Like
right.
that is such a real thing. Like, trust me. So I'm trying to word it in
Did
ways
you say that in Proverbs too?
No, that's not. That's
was
Don't
Songs of
Awaken
Solomon.
Love is Song of Solomon.
Yeah.
But it's such a real thing that I'm like, if and it's funny because at first I was jokingly in my journal being like, he writes about this a lot. It's goofy. And then I thought, but dude, I don't think of many things that can tear your life apart. It's drugs and bad relationships.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm pretty
gosh.
sure those two things can ruin your life faster and worse than anything else.
and create more problems, like bad relationships than bad kids, who
The
then
drama.
kind of builds them in their life.
Get the wrong person pregnant before you're married. Can you think of a way to destroy your life faster? You're done, dude.
When in recovery meetings, they'll say it's the romance and finance. Those are the things that are, whether it be triggers or causes or whatever,
Interesting, yeah.
stressors
Pressure
that will,
points for sure.
right, that will press you towards a direction that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
And that leads back to drugs or to gambling or to sleeping around or alcohol. And that really has kind of struck home in so many ways of like, gosh, obviously my life hasn't been the healthiest. And so the idea of romance and finance and then going to scripture, it's like, oh, it's totally true there.
Yeah.
And respecting, you can't have more than one master. You can't, or that this is the purpose of man and woman and becoming one, under God. And it's just the idea of it's so practical, and just your approach to loving the people in your life, and clinging to placing your treasures in the right things. And that's been something that's really been been a change for me is just trusting in that regard, and mainly finance. That's been something that's been a huge change in the past few years.
Where you put your treasure is important.
Yes. Yeah.
It's funny
And-
that it's romance and finance is a witty. That's actually a witty way to say it. They did a great job with that, because that really is a.
You could see the rise and fall of people because of those two things for sure.
Dude.
The destruction both of those can cause, and also the happiness.
They said for years, and I think it's been, I don't want to say disproven, but I think it's been expanded upon maybe a little bit. But they said for years that money was the number one reason for divorce. It's pretty clear that it's resentment now, but it's like usually that finance is the reason for the
Causes it.
resentment.
Yeah,
so it's kind of this
yeah.
interesting thing, but it's like there's
weird-
something
it's
goofy
weird how
about
they-
money.
It's weird how it presses on things. I used to say all the
It
time.
presses on things.
Yeah, I always say it. I said money is not the cause of divorce. It's the revealer of problems. When you're having problems, if there is money, if there's anything going on with you and your spouse, money will absolutely press on those things.
They're
It
spending
will
too
be a
much. You're spending too
right,
much.
or whatever. And I mean, it really, really weirds things out. But it
affects
is
your-
resentment,
it's,
by the
it's
way.
not just financial
resentment's number
security.
Resentment's number one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your financial security, but it affects your emotional security, just everything.
Yeah.
The stability in your life. So
That's crazy.
Yeah, honestly, being not even joking, like being in ministry and being crazy poor has really been a great way to build a strong marriage, though, because it was really never going to be about money, and it was actually weathering.
That's encouraging.
It's
so.
weathering some really tough conversations.
What's funny is I think being poor is such a great foundation, and then I think when you get some money, it's really interesting, because that is, I think, is more telling than when you're poor. Because when you're poor, you don't have money to mess up with. You might mess up with credit, but that's going to get frozen at some point, so you got to work through it. When you start to get a little bit of money and there's security in it, then there's the stewardship. Are you putting your security in the money?
Yeah.
Like, and it creates this whole new depth
who do
to
you
it.
blame when the money goes bad?
Oh, dude.
Like it's some interesting lessons. You know what I mean? Some interesting things like, oh, you know what? Even if you own it, can the spouse forgive? Like, like I made a bad financial decision here.
Right.
Or when you look back and say, who did that wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's an
awesome.
interesting thing. Yeah, it's an interesting
kinda neat.
dynamic. But you're right. It did build some really like where money didn't drive us apart. It drove us together. We basically said, hey, however this turns out, we got each other.
Yeah.
It's interesting that a lot of people who, and it's just come up recently with a lot of people in my life where it's, and it's rarely a good thing. It's rarely when a good thing happens, but it'd be like, I can't believe, I have a hard time understanding why God would allow this, right? And I
mostly see that as I evaluate couples, but go ahead.
I struggle with
And children.
I struggle with knowing like really what to say because I get really frustrated because I'm like, I feel like they're just completely wiping away their free will and self accountability, and just like you're just saying God, He's not the puppet master. You made these, track it back,
Yeah.
And obviously, He allows these things to happen, and it will work for your good as long as you continue to seek Him. But I just don't. It seems like a very common thing people are saying.
I think it's better. I think you're better off saying like, why didn't my true friends tell me if they didn't? Do you know what I mean? Like, why did you're my good friend? And I think it's okay to ask like, hey, if you saw problems, I'm just curious, why weren't you willing to say something? I know it could have been hard. Like, I think those are fair questions. Like looking back and be like, hey, this was kind of a jacked up relationship and you never said anything.
Okay, so I want to. Here's the problem. I've got like 8 more minutes,
And I want to get to one would you rather.
He might push this back because I really want to unpack that. You're right. I think a lot of people use that. I think a lot of people use it inappropriately is the wrong term.
right.
Because a lot of times you're asking why God allowed natural consequences of your or someone else's actions.
People do
That's
it.
insane.
But people do it.
However, to Steelman, I recently heard a phenomenal debate, atheist, Christian. There's a parasite.
It was one person. It was an atheist Christian.
There's a parasite that is the only reason it exists is to and the only way it can survive is to infect a human baby and then burrow its way out of the eye, blinding the child. That's its entire existence. It exists for that and only that.
So why did God create this?
And the atheist is like, you can't, like, it's if you're an all-powerful God, just don't make that thing. That, like, of all the things.
And mosquitoes.
Amen. My wife would agree. And so he's like, that is one of his primary reasons to not believe in a God, especially the God of the Bible, who you're saying is love. And he even goes with, I'm not even saying God created it. God allowed it to evolve into the
that's
thing
my
that
favorite argument is who's the bag man?
Yeah, exactly.
Because 'cause I had this argument with somebody recently where they're just like, oh, it's simple. I go, it's not, because God has the ability to intervene and chooses not to. So you can be like, he didn't make that happen, but it is still worth wrestling with.
That's
this.
my point.
Yes.
You got to wrestle
And
with
if
that.
you're a believer, you can rest in, Joseph's, what you meant to me for evil, God meant to me for good. I think believers have that ability because you already believe God is good. I think outside of that sphere, that's a hard thing to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Because we
and
really
I
believe in the
can't
goodness of God.
reconcile, I'm not saying me, this is the response I hear very often. I can't reconcile my version of goodness and being very generous in saying, like, yeah, my version of goodness might be wrong, but my version of goodness, if I can do it better than your wonderful God, then sorry.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm not that great. And if I can do it better than the great guy, then he's not that great.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with something like that?
It is tough. The wrestling is, because for me, it's like the first thought, which feels like a blanket statement, almost a cop-out, so I don't really say it. It's more just where my foundation is like, well, at the fall, we said, hey, you know what, God, we know better. We want to know what's between good and evil.
Right.
And then chaos and entropy ensues,
Sure,
and
the
this is a
planet
broken
falls
world.
with humanity, right.
And then it's like, well, I get that's a blanket statement. It's not necessarily a good argument.
But God allowed that to happen.
He did.
Right.
It's kind of like, and then, people who are, well, they'll take very strongly the like sins of the father aspect, like eating the sour grapes and the kids, their teeth are on edge kind of idea. And then God said, stop using that, stop saying that.
Right.
And so it is worth wrestling. I don't really have a definite answer. I just know that there's the brokenness. There's a connection with the brokenness.
I
in
mean,
this
the
world.
problem with evil has been being debated for thousands of years.
Right.
So
Right.
And that's
not having a
really
good
what-
answer for
the
it is,
idea
you get
of
it.
the idea, it's like it goes. The fun part about that argument is, well, you're arguing about this. The basis of your argument is that the atheist is recognizing it is wrong. Well, if you're atheist, why would you say it's wrong?
So here's what right there is the best argument that you can have in terms of you don't, and not to be a jerk, but it's like you don't get to say what's wrong
Because you don't believe in morality.
because you don't believe
there's no
in an
objective.
ultimate
It's all
reality.
relative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
societal rules, not morality.
so I actually think that's
And
a great
evolution.
starting point to move someone from completely atheist to agnostic.
Exactly.
However, then I go, cool, I'm agnostic then.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to lead me over to your God.
Right.
Your God is allowing and doing things that I find atrocious. Bridge that gap for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, now, how do you bridge that gap?
Well,
Yeah.
with agnosticism, you can't stay there. It doesn't. You can't live your life that way. So it's like I'm agnostic when it comes to spirituality, but in other parts of life, I have convictions, I have opinions.
sure.
I think so. No one's necessarily truly, agnostic, or really when they say they're atheist. I really am interested. Like, how much do you live that out? Like, do you, without the idea of morality or moral objectivity?
Sure, but that doesn't bridge that gap. Though.
I always think
I'd say search. Sorry, I didn't finish. I would say that. Then I would say start searching. Like, just do your research. I would say read the Bible, read the Quran, read the Bhagavad Gita, read, search.
Read
man.
Ryan's Proverbs.
You're gonna find truth.
Read Ryan's Proverbs.
If you
You're gonna have the cleanest
you
room
seek
if
it-
you read my Proverbs.
Why,
Flush the
why
toilet.
is it? Why is it? I guess the other part is those arguments always seem like they're in a vacuum to me. How come they're not measured against the goodness of the world, though?
Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm so sorry. I love your point. I want to get to that in one sec. You're telling them to look at all the religions.
Because if you're agnostic, you're saying, "Oh, that I think there's a higher power out there," but you're saying, "Okay, so you're trying to know who God is."
But is that are you leading them to what are you trying to do by saying that?
Seek and you'll find.
Okay.
I think it would be
Okay.
like, because I would understand if I'm Christian and they're atheists and going like, well, of course you're going to sell me on your God. I go, I don't have to, bud. You can read through everything you want and you'll find truth.
So you're saying don't worry about bridging that gap right now.
Yeah.
The gap of your wonderful God, the parasite.
The Holy Spirit, if you're seeking it, the Holy Spirit is chasing you down.
So
man.
you're saying, almost table that, look for general truth first. Okay.
Right.
Okay. What were you? Sorry, that was.
No.
I just wanted to get there because
Yeah,
I actually
sorry.
think that's an interesting.
Yeah, mine's always there's the. So before that
Okay, yeah.
baby was born, somebody received a baby. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like the whole idea of it always feels like we isolate these. Here's one terrible thing, and not that there aren't many terrible things.
Yeah.
But it's never in the balance of, we don't look at life that way as humans. Humanity is mixed with pleasure and pain. And so I'm always like, so God never gets the credit for the good. He only gets the blame for the bad. And I always thought, not that I don't think there's anything wrong with the blame. I just thought, your reason to not believe in God is this bad thing.
Okay.
So then I could say, then your reason to believe in God is the good things.
Right.
Okay.
Like,
So let's walk this out then.
yeah.
I do believe in a creator. I do believe in a God. I just struggle with the God of the Bible because of the bad things that I see in the Bible, and then because of this parasite, let's say, like,
Right.
Right.
So I'm not even. I'm even giving you I can't look around, and this is pretty personal. I can't look around and be like, look at all this stuff that obviously a human created. I mean, there's nothing in this shot that you would look at and go, somebody create everything that you
Right,
see
right.
in this shot. A human
I
created.
mostly think of love. I think of the intangibles that we have, that
yeah.
humans have love.
Right.
Like the idea that you can have a child. That I don't even pick relationships. I pick
Yeah.
kids.
Right.
'Cause I
Which
always
the
think, like,
argument it would then be there's an evolutionary benefit to that love.
yeah, and I guess if
I'm
you're-
just trying to steal, man. I'm not trying to be a
I
jerk
know,
here.
and I-
I'm just-
yeah,
I
and
get
I would,
that.
and I what's funny is though, and I would almost push back against the evolutionary concept is, but love doesn't exist in the animal kingdom, and evolution still occurs.
You don't think so?
I don't think
There's
so.
monogamy in the animal
Not
kingdom.
monogamy.
No, love.
Love.
I think
Love.
there's love in the animal kingdom.
You think there's? I think there's.
Maybe it's not the version that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I think
could see
there's
that.
a higher form of love that we experience, which
That
again,
conscious-
it could just be the desire to, procreate.
a
Could
little
be
bit
in
of conscious self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe you could argue, but you see self-sacrifice in the animal kingdom too.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And so
I think protective and again furthering the line, right? The idea of that evolutionary concept that someone would say, I see that, but the idea that we have a higher form of love. I think scientifically look at that humans
it's
have a
not
higher form
bad.
of love.
It's not bad. I think the argument would be that because of our consciousness, we've evolved that love that before it was for survival. And has evolved into, because we don't necessarily need that same survival once that kid is of age, that now it translates to something that looks more.
I would say at that point, then it would go against the idea of evolution, which is survival of the fittest. And now it's not a
Well,
survival
and-
instinct at that point. It's something more.
I
It's
think
not
it's-
just pure survival.
I
at
think
that
it was
point.
intentional. I think that's why, perhaps why God created it and allowed that to happen, because you can witness through nature and looking at the stars. And there's many scriptural references in regards to just witnessing creation and knowing that there's God. So maybe those who are in that position of scientist, atheist, evolutionist, and we're talking macroevolution, and they go, well, hold on a second. I just witnessed, in this study, I witnessed something that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make it, they are expressing love to their children and protection when truly the kin was weak, like they should have just thrown it away, but the mother protected it. That didn't make sense to me. So it's possible that the love that does exist, that may not be the same, conscientious, higher thinking love that we have, but may still exist within nature, as God is wanting to witness that to those who are seeking it through nature. I don't know.
Interesting. I'm just trying to put myself in someone's
You're doing a
shoes.
good, you're doing
Yeah.
a good job. And I
Yeah.
think it's along the lines of, it's just, I don't think the idea, I was bringing this up in a different group because I used to be like, well, we're never meant to live forever. This world's all passing away.
Right.
We have a very short, limited perspective. So the idea of things die. I go, that I'm like, I go, but then there's somebody who's been raised in a sex trafficking ring and they're raped every day of their life.
Right.
Right.
So I'm like,
Exactly.
that defeats that argument.
amount of evil
Do you know what I mean?
is
Like, because
just-
that is horrible existence.
Exactly.
Even though
Right.
they're going to die, they've literally spent their entire life suffering.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
somebody born with a disease or something like that. And so so I get the idea of natural evil, humans do evil things, but the effect that God allows these things, I guess that for me, the balance is, again, anecdotally, I came from a life of suffering. I had a lot of bad things happen in my life. My mom died when I was young, all the things. In the balance of that perspective, was I encountered goodness and kindness and forgiveness and acceptance and love. And so for me, when I was evaluating God, it was never just the bad I saw. It was in light of the good I also saw. And that good illuminated there is a good God to me, as opposed to it's completely washed out by the bad that I experienced in life. So I guess I started with world is bad, and I was introduced to God is good. Other people are starting with God is good, and they're like, ha, but the world is bad.
But here's all this bad. I do think anecdotally, you made a good distinction when you said it was anecdotal for you, because now it's anecdotal for the other person.
Right. That's what I mean. Which way you're starting.
It is all bad.
Where you're starting, right?
And so I think it's
everybody's like, God is good, God is good,
Yeah.
and you're like, aha, here's the bad. Here's the hole in your argument.
But it is difficult for me to reconcile. And again, I'm really trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, you're steel man.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's difficult to reconcile that kid born in the cobalt mine. That's all he knew, and he gets sick at a very young age, or has an accident within the cobalt mine. He's born, lives in slavery.
Never hears about Jesus.
Never heard about Jesus.
Could you argue that thing doesn't exist if the fall doesn't happen? Or were there mosquitoes in the garden? I'm just asking. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're going from why this God, not any God, you're an agnostic at this point. I'm arguing for Jesus and the God of the Bible.
So
could you argue that from that perspective, that the fall of humanity, that thing doesn't exist?
So that's the argument. So personally, that's the argument I always use is you're right. This sucks. It was never meant to be this way.
Yes.
But in order for us to get the good, the actual good and free will, we have to have this bad. I don't like it. I don't want it.
Right.
I want to think that there was a better way, but I can't imagine God not choosing the best way. So that's my argument.
Yeah.
I do get hung up, if you will, sometimes when it's like, bless you.
Bless you.
Why there's not some like, yeah, but if you in your finite mind can come up with a better way, like, why not do the better way?
Right.
And why can't you, this is an argument I heard recently that I thought was interesting, is why can't you have love without free will? Why can't you have why can't you have free will without sin?
I think love is one of the main essences of love is freedom.
Is that you
the free
choose it.
will.
But why can you honestly not have, if I gave you a choice of a great salmon dinner and a great salad, and I was like, you get to choose.
Horrible.
Okay, good point. A great salmon dinner and a great chicken dinner. They're both really, really healthy. And I give you the choice. You still have free will, but I'm not giving you the choice of a horrible cheeseburger that's gonna like hurt your arteries and clog your arteries and make you fat.
Why does there need to be redemption?
Does there
Ultimately,
does there
that's what
have
you're saying.
to be evil and bad choices to have free will? Why can't we just actually have utopia and have free will without introducing harm to other humans?
Right. Is the world the idea of free will? Do the options have to be? Does that option have to be on the table? Right.
Sure. Exactly.
Does sin even have to be an option in free will?
Yeah.
I guess in the sense of freedom really freedom, where it's just because the reality is in this world, in the garden, in
But
the way
again,
you could have built a different world.
Yes.
Where sin wasn't even an option.
You still
there was no
get-
tree.
So this is what
And it goes back to is what's the point? Why did God allow sin to happen? Why
you
does
still get
redemption
free will,
matter?
mind you. You
Right.
still get free will. You get to choose.
Well,
I
because it
just
goes back
took
to in heaven. Will there be free will in heaven?
I just took the genuinely bad options off the table for you because I don't want to see you get hurt. In the same way that I give my kids a ton of options and free will, I try and remove the harmful things even from their face.
Is that you're reflecting? Is this one of the ways that we're made in God's image? Is that He does have complete freedom to do anything He wants, and yet He chooses good
It's
every
pure
time.
benevolence.
So is that how we're made in His image? He's like, I'm not limiting the options. He goes, because you can choose the good. You are capable to choose the good things. You just don't, but you can. I'm giving you all the options.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
But he's like, I
mean, you're
didn't
talking-
make you do
yeah.
these things. Like I literally gave you,
Yeah.
but you could have done anything. You could, you
But
have capable.
Why even introduce those?
Again, it's more like because he has all the options. So is that one of the ways we're in his image? Is that he's like, I gave you all the options.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, you're asking about heaven. That's heaven. That's
Well, that's what
that's
scares
the
me about heaven.
salvation.
Can I
Sure.
sit in heaven
Can
and get kicked out?
I know.
yeah. Can I get prideful? Can I,
My only thought, and you guys can pick this apart because I think I don't know if it's even right. My only thought is that he really didn't. He didn't want any of it. He wanted the garden. He created the real utopia. And the only evil that got introduced was outside of him. That's the point that I kind of hold on to, and I might be very
mean the
wrong on
serpent?
this. Yes, he's like, no, I created it this way. I even created Lucifer. Didn't want him to do the things that he did. That was not my plan. He did that
Lucifer
in
had the
his
free will.
own volition.
Right.
I didn't want him
Along
to do
with
it.
a third of the angels to choose to go with
Right.
Lucifer.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, well, why'd you create Lucifer
Right,
then?
that's the-
And then I do wonder, and this is going to sound like the most sacrilegious thing I've ever said, is did God know Lucifer was going to do what he did?
Had to.
yes, he's outside space and time.
Had to have.
So why create Lucifer to be
Right.
then?
Right.
Why
You know
is
what I
it-
mean?
Right.
Like,
It does go down to why this plan, like meaning like could he? And we go back to ideas like why redeem the world through becoming a man and sacrificing your son? Could you have
Yeah.
been like, I'm going to sacrifice a sandwich because I
Yeah.
really
He
love
could
my
have just
son.
snapped it
And then
back
like,
to whatever.
It
and
really
even
goes back to
before
his
that,
plans.
why? Like that plan is kind of beautiful. It's horrific and grotesque of what Jesus had to go through. And quick side note, I thought this was so interesting. I just read this thing or saw this video that was, it was called like the most horrific thing that ever happened to Wolverine. It was because he's immortal,
Yeah.
and so
Right.
he's had horrible things happen to him.
Yeah.
This is not a joke. They pointed to the worst thing that ever happened to Wolverine in his crazy long existence, and all the comic books, all the movies, everything written about him was when he got crucified. And I was like,
Wow.
"You're kidding me!" They crucified him on an X,
Yeah.
and it was like the kind of X-Men, like they wanted to, and then they tortured him. That was the worst thing that's ever happened to Wolverine. And I'm like,
Wow.
you mean the thing that happened to Jesus?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
dear God, that was
Right.
the worst thing we could come up with. I thought that was so interesting. Like that is
yeah.
the most torturous thing we've got.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right. We're not going to solve this.
we're not. But I will say,
Good discussion. though.
it's a great discussion and worth
And investigating.
worth unpacking. But I do like that where we kind of landed is God doesn't want this.
Yeah.
God doesn't want the evil.
Yeah,
And I
this
think
goes back
that's
to
an
the garden.
important place to
Yeah.
be at.
This
is
was
that
not the way
Yeah.
he opened the door for us to do anything, and it's what we chose.
we tend to
Yeah.
not solve very many things on this podcast, but I
Have we
think
solved anything?
I think that is a good place. Is that
Yeah.
And I think as pastors, I try and remind people that as often as possible. This God's plan really is utopia.
Yeah.
He really does want that for us. Jesus even said, "I came that they may have life and have it to the full."
And that utopia is the relationship with him,
Right.
a perfect relationship with him.
Yeah.
So, do we want to end with a would you rather? Do we have time?
We gotta do it, would you?
Yeah.
We're doing quick. I set a time. I set a meeting up too at this time.
you?
But yeah. So because
Okay.
I thought you were going to be doing it. So go
This
ahead.
is a good one.
more.
Would you rather every single time you fall asleep be perfect, or every meal you eat be perfect?
So perfect sleep versus perfect food.
Oh, perfect
I
sleep.
thought you meant we.
No.
Oh.
It's a perfect.
Like I'm
sleep.
perfect only when I'm
just-
sleeping.
You wake up and you're like, that's $1 million.
Yeah,
I feel just
sleep.
incredible.
oh yeah, sleep.
I can still make good food.
Yeah, it won't be perfect.
Fine.
It'll be okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I was leaning towards food,
Yeah.
but now thinking about it, like there's nothing like waking up.
I
and
don't think there's
feeling like
anything
you
better.
are just because
Yeah.
I could eat mediocre food and be like, I'm fine.
And be fine.
But waking
I
up with a
think
perfect sleep.
I think the sleep you'll benefit from that because
Agreed.
you'll eat better.
agreed.
If you don't eat well, you're gonna have bad sleep.
The research on sleep is unbelievable. That we're finding out like it is the single most
You seen
important
that
thing
the
you
sleep
can
guy,
do.
the Australian sleep doctor guy?
No.
I think he was on Rogan, and he obviously he's got an accent. It's awesome to listen to him. But he talks about sleep, and I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna die very early. That's what you're
Dude,
saying.
the lack of sleep, the whole like the washing of the brain when you sleep, and I'm like,
The healing of your system.
Oh my God.
resetting. It's like, whoa.
they say if you're trying to lose weight, if you're dieting, the number one thing is sleep, not the food. It's like you can eat perfect and sleep very poorly and still gain weight. Like
My biggest issue is I have to go to bed early enough to get 8 hours because as soon as that sun is up,
Didn't they
remotely
debunk the 8 hours?
it remotely creeps into
for
the
some
room.
people. So it's 6 to like 9 or 10 even on some people.
Oh.
It's just individually. Mine is 7. 7 is my sweet
Yeah,
spot, man.
yeah.
8 is my number.
If there's nothing going on and I fall asleep, I will wake up in 7 hours and I will feel amazing.
I will say if I wake up, because this naturally, just like whatever I go to sleep, if I just wake up naturally, it's good. Like if
Yeah,
my
I
body's just
agree.
like, as long
I
as
agree.
it's that, I'm just like, I
I
wake up.
try to not set alarms anymore.
I don't.
I'm trying to
Don't.
just time it to where I'm like, I want to be in bed about 30 to 45 minutes before that 7 hours,
Yep.
so that I can fall asleep and like, because I'll watch my iPad and relax a little bit, and then I want to be like, okay, so if I watch my iPad for 30 minutes, then fall asleep 7 hours, then I'll wake up. Okay, and I try and back.
Have
it
you
out
seen
like that.
the Pete Holmes on explaining sleep to aliens?
Oh
No.
my gosh, yes,
It's so fun. You haven't
good.
seen it?
I gotta watch it.
Oh, it's so good. We'll
Pete
show it
Holmes is
afterwards.
All right.
Check it out, guys. Thanks for joining us on You Won't Hate It. I'm Josh.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Joe.
We solve nothing.